Despite the sunny conditions, the seas and the wind continue to build throughout the day. Wave Rover right now is under just a reefed jib. The mainsail has been stowed completely. The conditions will overpower Wave Rover even with that small amount of sail up, meaning that I will have to come up with another way of controlling the motion of the boat. And in this case, I've decided to deploy the series Drogue. As the sun sets on what is the last evening of this voyage, the seas have not calmed down, not in any great way. Let's go outside and see the sunset and take one last look at the sea before it gets dark. Well, it's day 12, the morning of day 12. We're about 30 miles from Lanzarote, and we're about 40 miles from our port. In fact, we'd practically be there right now if it weren't for this storm that we're in. Last night conditions got considerably worse, and the waves and the wind built throughout the night, and it was proving too much for the single reef jib that I had out, and Wave Rover was getting overpowered. So at first light this morning, I brought the sail down and I deployed the series Drogue. The series Drogue then brought the stern into the weather and the wind, and now Wave Rover is safe. We're making about 1.5 knots south. It slowed us down. Under any other configuration, we'd be making at least 6 knots south. So this will buy us about 24 hours for conditions to mitigate, and hopefully we can get some sail back up then. But right now, conditions are far too dangerous for Wave Rover to attempt to close in on the island and make it to a port. So we'll step outside really briefly because there are breaking waves, and we'll take a quick look at what the seas look like, and we'll take just a really quick look at the series Drogue. There's not much to see. It's just a bridle that's going into the water, and the steering gear, the Mark III, I've taken the vane off because we don't need any extra strain. And even with no sails up when the wind gusts, and it's gusting over 40. When it gusts, you can just feel the whole boat shudder. And I'm not sure if the camera microphone is picking this up, but you can just, I can hear the wind just wailing in the background here. Anyway, we'll take a quick look outside. So the boat is an absolute mess right now. I was asleep in the bunk and we got hit by a rogue wave and the boat was pushed to its side and we were heeled over at a pretty good angle and the hatch opened and water came in. And it landed right on top of me and the bunk and the sleeping bag and the other bunk. So everything, I'll just show you the boat, everything is a mess. Right now I'm sleeping on top of this sail cover to make the bunk dry. And on top of that, when I determined how the water came in, because it was such a huge bang, I thought maybe the port lights had broken out, but no. In fact, it was just a freak thing that happened, and the hatch opened. You know, the hatch was closed when I checked it, but it opened just enough under the angle and pressure of the water. So, I mean, now I have it dogged down. It can't happen again. We've been hit again with another wave, and nothing came in. But I had to pump the boat out, and when I started pumping it out, the pump failed. So then in the dark, I had to find the right tools, pull the pump apart, determine what was wrong, and put it back together. That took about half an hour, and now the pump is working again. The boat is pumped out. We're still streaming the series Drogue. We're still about 30 miles off of the island. We're still making about 2 knots progress, actually more like 1.8 knots progress, and we're still waiting for the weather to improve. So now it's the morning of day 13. Last night was a good night. We had about 3 contacts that had a closest point of approach of less than 2 miles. I hailed all of them on VHF, and all 3 responded quickly, and they identified my position. They could see my navigation lights. I'm doing this at 3 miles because I'm finding if it's any farther than 3 miles, I just have too much difficulty trying to find my navigation lights. And 3 miles gives enough time for everybody to maneuver if they need to avoid any collision. So that's the good news. The bad news was about 2 o'clock in the morning. We got hit by a rogue wave on the port side, and it pushed Wave Rover. It heeled her right over more than 45 degrees. And at the same time, the force of the breaking wave opened the hatch. And this is the first time the hatch has ever been opened. Like it always just stays shut, just with gravity. Even in the hurricane, it stayed shut. But this time, the water probably at the angle we were heeled at, the force of the breaking wave, it forced the hatch open just a little bit, just enough to send about a barrel of water into the cabin. And I was sleeping on the starboard bunk, and this is where the majority of the water landed. This is just totally soaked, and the water is literally dripping from the sleeping bag. So, and it's surprisingly cold here in the Canaries, especially with this depression that was going through that brought the gale. So, yeah, it was a cold night. It was a cold, wet night. So I ended up immediately trying to find out where the water came in, because you've got to remember it's 2 in the morning, it's dark, I'm being woken up from a sleep. I first of all checked all the ports, and they were all sound. I checked the cabin sides, it was sound. I mean, the noise from this breaking wave was extraordinary. So I thought there was structural damage. And then closer look, you know, I determined it was most likely the hatch. And the hatch was closed at this point because it was only briefly opened. But now, after that, I secured the hatch completely. There's a proper securing mechanism I use. Then I started pumping out the boat with the bilge pump. And I started pumping, and I got about halfway through the process of pumping the water out of the boat when the pumping mechanism, this portion, separated from this rubber portion. And, you know, this was, like I said, very early in the morning. So then I had to get my tools out, pull the pump apart. Now, I've never pulled one of those apart before. They're really quite simple once you get them apart, very simple. And I saw what the problem was. The bolt had worked itself loose. I was able to put it back through, tighten it up, and then get the pump back in motion. It took about 20 minutes to get that done. You gotta remember, there's a lot of motion and it's dark. So I got the rest of the boat pumped out. Now this morning, the conditions have improved quite a bit. The wind is probably only 15, maybe 18 knots, and the seas have died down. There's no more breaking waves at the top of the waves themselves. Now they're just waves maybe in the 2 to 3 meter category. I'm going to hoist some sail shortly. I'll hove to, and then when I'm hove to, I'll recover the Drogue, and then when the Drogue is recovered, I'll set course then for the marina I'm heading for, and I'll also try to get the outboard out. That's always been the critical thing. I mean, even during the storm, I could have sailed to the marina, but the marina has an entrance it's only 100 feet wide, and I'll be going to windward to get in through that entrance. It's simply not big enough to sail into, which they frown upon anyway. So I have to get the outboard tacked onto the stern, and that's the problem, because with waves like this, it'll just swamp the outboard. So that's why I've been using the Drogue to slow me down and not shoot past the position. I'm still about 30 miles away from the marina, so a combination of sailing there, and then in the last mile or two I'll turn on the outboard and try to keep it from getting swamped. Hopefully as the day goes on, the seas will flatten out a bit, and that would be even better. That'll make things so much easier. Anyway, I'll keep you posted. Oh yeah, just take a look at the mess in the cabin here. Floor is all wet. Sides, there's moisture all over the cabin top, the walls. Oh, and because the bunks were all wet, I had to pull out the boom cover, put that down, and ended up sleeping on that. And my only warm, dry clothes are the jeans that I would wear going to town, and this fleecy, which I wasn't wearing last night. I have a second one that I was wearing. So all my warm clothes right now are damp, with the exception of what I'm wearing. Anyway, we should be alongside before too long, and we'll get everything sorted out. Join me next week as I prepare Wave Rover for what will be her longest passage to date, approximately 4,000 miles from the Canaries to Panama.